Ships are a principal means of transportation, recreation, and also a primary means of conducting warfare worldwide since ancient times. While military aircraft are new in human history, the warship has actually had a lot of time to evolve. In more modern times, warships of exceptional scale, ingenuity, and design have arisen to intimidate and threaten opposing forces. Today, we discover the most awe-inspiring warships in history. Number 10. Yamato Class, Yamato and Musashi. The Imperial Japanese Navy is known for unleashing some rather unsettling creations in the midst of World War II maritime conflict. Yet while bigger and better is admittedly associated with American military might and engineering achievements, it is less well known that shipbuilders in Japan went about creating some of the most impossibly massive and terrifying battleships that the world has ever seen. The Yamato Class ships consisted of the namesake Yamato herself and her sister ship, the Musashi. The Yamato Class represented an enormous investment of battle resources in terms of materials, personnel, fuel, and armament in just 2 ships. These machines were the largest warships deployed during the Second World War. With an enormous hull length stretching 863 feet, the Yamato Class was greater in size than all other battleships worldwide, with 20% more water displacement than any American vessel. The USS Iowa-class vessels were the only battleships longer than the Yamato Class ships, but this vessel was still less massive than the Yamato. Over 30% of the total weight of the ship was comprised by the steel armor assigned to the vessel, while the weaponry included the most massive guns in the history of warships. The main guns of the Yamato class were the greatest in size placed on a warship ever, firing 18-inch diameter shells. The shells could be lobbed an incredible range of 25 miles. The Musashi was sunk on October 24, 1944 in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, while the Yamato was sunk when intercepted on a mission to run aground and fight to the end in defense of Okinawa on April 7, 1945. Number 9. USS Iowa-class. Named after an interior state with plenty of prairies, the USS Iowa-class might not come to mind at first thought when one is asked to think about the most fearsome and all-around impressive battleship classes in US naval history. The largest battleships ever built by the United States, the members of the USS Iowa-class were not only the greatest in size among American warships, but it was the only one with the capability of firing nuclear shells. It remains a mystery whether the ships actually went into service while carrying nuclear devices, but the fact is the ships had 16-inch guns capable of launching nuclear attacks. Furthermore, nuclear shells specifically built for the guns on the Iowa-class ships were produced, leading to a very intimidating scenario indeed. The USS Iowa herself served not only in the Pacific theater of World War II, but also became involved in the Korean War-related action. The ship was then decommissioned, recommissioned in 1984 to counter Soviet forces presenting concerns, decommissioned in 1990, and then recommissioned from 1999 to 2006 before being donated for museum exhibition. The vessel had the distinction of carrying President Franklin D. Roosevelt to a meeting in Tehran during World War II. The USS Iowa also bears a darker side to her history, notorious for killing 47 sailors as a result of a gun turret explosion in April of 1989. Number 8. Caio Duilio-class ironclad. Italy might not be well known as a country with a history as a leader in exceptional naval innovation, but the 19th century Royal Italian Navy, or Regia Marina, boasted a pair of warships that were the most powerful, speediest, and greatest in size among all battleships at that time. The Caio Duilio and the Enrico Dandolo, constructed in the 1870s and 1880s, also carried the largest guns possible at the time, none less than a set of the admittedly terrifying 17.72-inch rifle muzzle-loading guns. Known as ironclad battleships, the 2 machines were fortified with massive armor in the most critical areas, namely the engine zones and ammunition-holding areas of the ship. The remainder of the hull was not armored, but instead was separated into a multitude of watertight compartments. Any separate portion could fill up with water if breached or shot apart, without the entire ship going down. The brilliant design allowed the ship to be light and yet better protected than most other ships on the seas. Coupling exceptional firepower with extraordinary protection against being sunk, and you had a battleship to be respected. Designer Benedetto Brin certainly went above and beyond in creating an unusually formidable naval vessel. Number 7. USS Zumwalt. Destroyers are not always enormous, but one of the newest ships of war to enter service in the United States is a truly gigantic example of a destroyer. The USS Zumwalt is named after U.S. Navy Admiral, Chief of Naval Operations, the youngest ever when he served, and also a decorated veteran, Elmo Zumwalt, an American of combined Jewish-American and German-American heritage who is known for his anti-racism reformation work to improve personnel policies in the U.S. Navy. The ship bearing Zumwalt's name is extraordinarily futuristic and is the largest U.S. Navy destroyer in history that's ever been constructed. With its angular lines and the appearance of an ocean-going stealth aircraft, the ship will astonish first-time viewers with its modernistic and angular looks. The 610-foot vessel weighs 15,000 tons and was added to the U.S. naval fleet in 2016. While the new destroyer's looks may be nothing short of bizarre among warships, the ship has stealth capability. When seen on radar, the futuristic-looking machine looks like little more than a fishing boat in its cross-sectional appearance. The smooth, flat surface of the sections making up the exterior of this huge guided missile destroyer make for an unlikely UFO or spacecraft-like appearance that defines the USS Zumwalt as a most exotic ship. Number 6. HMS Vanguard. The largest battleship of the British Royal Navy, the HMS Vanguard was alone in her class. She held several other important records among warships built worldwide. She was also the fastest battleship in the Royal Navy's fleet. The HMS Vanguard represented the most spectacular sunset work of the battleship, being the first battleship to be launched for service in Britain's Royal Navy. The fact that this vessel was not only the largest battleship in the Royal Navy's fleet at a gigantic 814.5 feet in length, but also the fastest despite its huge size, is a remarkable accomplishment of naval engineering. The battleship could deploy at speeds of 30 knots or 35 miles per hour, bringing a heavy armament to the fight with less notice than required by slower ships. The ship did not see World War II action as she was commissioned after hostilities ended. As the last Royal Navy battleship, the HMS Vanguard was certainly in the spotlight with its status as the largest and fastest in its category, but in comparison to its great size and speed, the ship's armament was rather average. The only battleships in naval service worldwide that were larger were the American giant, the USS Iowa, and the huge Yamato-class battleships of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The ship is known for having transported King George VI, Queen Elizabeth, and Princess Elizabeth to South Africa in 1947. After its service, the ship was eventually scrapped in 1960. Number 5. Bismarck and Tirpitz. The largest German battleships ever unleashed, the infamous Bismarck and her sister vessel, the Tirpitz, were giant members of the Kriegsmarine during World War II. Together, the sister ships formed the Bismarck class of battleships. This class of battleships comprised of the Bismarck and the Tirpitz, and it represented an enormous amount of maritime might. The Bismarck was the largest warship of Germany with the greatest displacement of any warship developed in the European theater of World War II. The Bismarck herself measured an incredible 823.5 feet in length, with a displacement of 55,440 tons when fully loaded. Wide midship, the Bismarck beam measurement was 118 feet and 1 inch. The warship was equipped with a total of 8 15-inch guns, set up to fire forwards and backwards in a set of 4 twin turrets. The devastating firepower of the Bismarck allowed it to sink the HMS Hood. Following the loss of that vessel, a massive force of British naval vessels and aircraft chased down the Bismarck. On May 27, 1941, the Bismarck was scuttled and soon sunk by her crew after receiving a number of hits from British naval and air forces. Of the 2,200-man crew, 111 were rescued by British forces, while 800 remaining survivors were left behind after a U-boat alarm prompted a retreat. The next day, 2 further crew members were saved. Number 4. USS Nimitz-class. Some ship category must hold the record among naval vessels of being the largest warships in the world, and the modern holder of that record are the Nimitz-class aircraft carriers of the US Navy. An impressive 10 of these astonishingly huge vessels have been constructed, with the class being in commission since 1975. Named after the famed, highly regarded U.S. Navy Admiral Chester W. Nimitz Sr., born into a German-American family in Texas with a grandfather who served in the German Merchant Marines and was a key mentor to the young Nimitz in his life as he pursued a U.S. Navy career. Nimitz became the last U.S. Navy Fleet Admiral and held the role of Commander-in-Chief U.S. Pacific Fleet as well as Commander-in-Chief Pacific Ocean Areas. Nimitz was also known for being the U.S. Navy's top submarine expert. The enormous Nimitz-class aircraft carriers named in the history-making seaman's honor are all nuclear-powered, with an enormous size of 1,092 feet in overall length and a beam width of 252 feet. With their endurance, size, power, and number, they represent an impressive and highly capable component of the U.S. Navy's might. The gargantuan warships displace 113,339.52 tons and can carry up to 130 fighter jets or an alternative mix of aircraft. Exceptional armoring coupled with defensive armaments and a large number of aircraft ensure that these ships are very well protected. Number 3. Kirov Class. The Kirov Class represents enormous size in naval fleet equipment from Russia. Dating back to construction times between the 1970s and 1990s, the 4 vessels constructed are nuclear-powered battlecruisers that pack a punch with their massive size, range, endurance, and armament. The huge vessels were originally to number 5 in their ranks, but with 2 being deactivated and 1 in the refit process, only 1 vessel, Pyotr Veliki, is in operation as of 2018. The Kirov Class represents the world's largest surface-combatant warship, as distinguished from ships serving as aircraft carriers or built for amphibious assault. The appearance of the gigantic vessels on the world naval scene was enough impetus to provoke the US Navy into recommissioning the USS Iowa in response to the countering force presented to the US Navy in the form of these gigantic battlecruisers. The nuclear-powered Kirov-class ships were originally built for the Soviet Navy, but are now under the purview of the present-day Russian Navy. They stand out not only as the largest surface combatant warships in the world, but also being the heaviest, weighing in at a massive 28,000 tons when loaded. The ships boast a massive armament, including guns, anti-submarine missiles, anti-ship missiles, and surface-to-air SAM launchers. Number 2. Richelieu Class. During World War II, the 2 Richelieu-class battleships, the Richelieu itself and the Zumwalt, were prominent as the ships comprising the largest battleship project of the French Navy, and also its final one. The Richelieu operated until its scrapping in 1968, while the Zumwalt lasted 2 years longer, being scrapped in 1970. The ships were first operated by the Nazi puppet state Vichy France, a notorious fascist regime operating in the country. Subsequently, the ships were employed in service on the Allied side of operations in World War II. The exceptionally large European vessels could reach speeds of 30 knots or 35 miles per hour, impressive for their size. The gigantic and heavily armed ships measured an incredible 813.2 feet in length with a 108-foot beam. Weight standard for the Richelieu-class vessels was 35,000 tons. The monster ships ran on pressure-fired boilers with geared turbines with a set of 4 propellers, each having 4 blades. Not only was the speed and sheer size of these warships terrifying to encounter, their firepower was concentrated and deadly to face head-on. The Richelieu-class battleships were fitted with a battery of no less than 8 15-inch guns that were set up as 2 quad turrets that faced forward to shoot in the position of super-firing, with the gun on top firing over the gun below. Number 1. Le Fantasque-class destroyer. The fastest destroyer in naval history was not a modern vessel, but one constructed in France prior to World War II. The Le Fantasque-class destroyers, with a name meaning the capricious one, constituted a most formidable fleet of 6 vessels built for the French Navy and pressed into service during World War II. One would logically expect the fastest destroyer in the world to have been built by a cutting-edge naval force of the present day, but Le Fantasque-class ships were actually launched in the years 1933 and 1934. The new class of warships proved to be a double-edged sword in World War II hostilities, serving on the side of the fascist regime and Nazi puppet state Vichy France, and also on the side of the Free French forces in support of the Allied war effort in the European theater. These vessels boasted a lightning-fast speed of 52 miles per hour or 45 knots, gaining a notable advantage in outpacing enemy shipping. The size of the ships was impressive considering their speed. They measured 434 feet 5 inches in length with a beam of 39 feet 4 inches. 4 of the powerful vessels survived World War II, 2 were lost, with the remaining 4 being retired in the post-war years. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. We've got brand new videos just like this every day of the week. And as always, thank you for watching.